basic percentages and fraction equivalents. Sometimes it's easier to solve a problem with fractions rather than with percentages, and vice versa. What happens if we start with a fraction of 10%? The first thing you need to remember before you turn it into a fraction is that percent literally means out of 100. So 10% is simply equal to 10 out of 100. Now, for a lot of fractions, including this one, you then have to look to see what you can simplify it with. If there's a number you can divide the top and the bottom by to make it as simple as possible. Now in this case, I can divide the top by 10 and the bottom by 10, which gives us a result of 1 over 10. This makes 10 our highest common factor. It's the biggest number that we can divide the top and the bottom by. More of highest common factors in a wee second. Let's look at our next example. Let's say we have 25%. And we want to turn that into a fraction. Well, again, remember that percent means out of 100. So 25% is 25 out of 100. Look for the highest common factor, the biggest number that you can divide the top and the bottom by. Because remember, if you simplify it and you don't divide by the same number, top and bottom, then you alter the entire value of the fraction. The only way to keep the fraction's value the same is to divide top and bottom by the same number. In this case, the highest common factor is 25. So let's divide the top by 25, the numerator, and the bottom, the denominator. We do that and we end up with 1 on the top and 4 on the bottom. 25% is equal to 1/4. Now, what happens if you get yourself to the stage where you know 25% is 25 over 100? And then you correctly say to yourself, okay, I can divide the top here by 5, and I can divide the bottom by 5. That gives us 5 on the top and 20 on the bottom. Now that's perfectly correct what you've done, but it's not the fraction in its simplest form. 5 isn't the highest common factor. As long as you recognise with your new result that you still got some work to do, then that's okay. You can do it in 2 steps. We can divide that by 5, and we can divide that by 5. If we do that, we end up with 1 on the top, 4 on the bottom, and we get the same result that we had before. Now, there are a number of standard results that you should know, you should try and learn. I'm going to show you them in a table in a wee second below here, and then I think you should pause the video, give them some thought, and see how many of them you can work out, and see if you can get them all down to their simplest form. Before we do that, couple of key points to remember. All percentages are fractions out of 100, and then you have to simplify the fraction, ideally using the highest common factor. But as we saw in our second example here, if you don't get the highest common factor first time, that's okay. Just keep at it until you get to where you need to be with the fraction in its simplest form here. Okay, here's our table of standard percentages. Okay, so here are our answers. 1%, well, remembering as we do with all the rest, percent means out of 100. 1% is just going to be 1 out of 100. 5%, well, that would start as 5 out of 100 and would become, does become, 1 out of 20. 10%, well, we've done that already. We know now that that's 1 over 10. 20%, well, 20%, that's going to be 1 over 5. Let's tidy that up a bit. That's going to be 1 over 5. There we go. 25%. See that one a lot, that's a quarter. 30%, well that becomes 3 over 10. 33 and a third and 66 and 2/3 we'll come back to. 40%, well that would start off as 40. In fact, let's show you this one here, just as an example. 40%, well that's going to be 40 out of 100. That would then become 4 over 10. And eventually, you would get to 2 over 5. So 40%, well that's 2 out of 5. 2 over 5. 50%, well that's probably the most famous fraction, if there is such a thing as a famous fraction, but that's a half. 60%, well 60%, that starts off as 60 over 100. You might take it down to 6 over 10, and eventually you'll get to 3 over 5, 3/5. 70%, in many ways that's a little more straightforward, that's just 7 over 10. 75%, another one of those famous fractions, 3/4. 80%, well your initial step would be 80 over 100, you would then break that down to 8 over 10, and eventually 4/5, like so. 90%, that's 9 over 10. And 100% is, of course, 1. Just the number 1. Now, briefly, I wanted to mention these two that we haven't looked at. These are good to know, good to understand. Now, this is written here as 33.3%. Very often you'll hear it written down, you'll see it written down as 33 and 1/3%. 33 and 1/3% is just equal to 1/3. And likewise, 66.6%, you'll more often see it written down as 66 and 2/3%. And that's equal to 2/3. Thanks for watching.